grew up hearing the old men whisper about the children who were born on nights when the wind refused to move, children who carried something older than breath inside them. But no one believed those stories until the night Elias arrived. The midwife said the air turned colder the moment he opened his eyes, and the candles bent toward him as if something was inhaling from behind his tiny ribs. The villagers tried to pretend nothing was wrong, but animals kept their distance, and mothers clutched their babies tighter whenever Elias passed. I was 17 then, old enough to know fear, but young enough to question it. Yet every time he looked at me with those still lake-black eyes, something inside my chest tightened like a warning I did not yet understand. The elders refused to speak of the omen carved into his birthmark, a spiral broken at the edge as if it had been scratched by an unseen hand. They said that mark belonged to the first child cursed in the hills centuries ago, a child who had been promised to something that lived between the trees. Elias did not cry, did not laugh, did not babble like other children. He only watched, always watched, as if waiting for someone he recognized in a world that had forgotten him. When he turned 5, the disappearances began. First it was goats, found days later with their bodies twisted in shapes bones should never hold. Then it was Marta, the baker's daughter, whose footprints led into the forest and simply ended. The search party lasted 3 days, but the only thing they found was her ribbon, tied around a tree branch 3 meters high, fluttering as if in a breeze that didn't exist. The villagers avoided Elias after that, but he followed them silently, his shadow stretching longer than it should in the dusk. I tried to convince myself that fear could twist perception. But on the night of the harvest festival, when the bonfire cracked open like a burning mouth, and the flames bent toward Elias, just as the candles once had, I felt the truth press against the back of my skull. He stood at the edge of the crowd, unmoving, while the fire leaned toward him like a creature recognizing its keeper. No one spoke. No one breathed. And then he smiled for the first time, a slow, impossible curl that did not belong to a child. After that night, elders gathered in secret, their voices shaking as they debated what to do. They spoke of rituals and choices and ancient debts that demanded payment in blood. They said Elias was not meant to stay in the village much longer, that something would come for him when the moon reached its final waning. I should have stayed away, but the night before the ritual I heard soft knocking on my door. When I opened it, Elias stood there, barefoot, eyes shining in the dark as if lit from within. He reached out and placed his small hand on my wrist, and suddenly I wasn't in my home anymore. I was standing in the forest clearing, the one where Marta's footprints had ended. The trees breathed around us, their branches curling inward like ribs, closing around a heart. Elias spoke without moving his lips, a voice echoing inside my skull, telling me I was the only one who ever saw him as something other than a monster. He told me he didn't want to go alone. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, and the shadows around us thickened, shaping themselves into figures that had once been human but had forgotten the warmth of skin. They moved closer, whispering my name in voices made of soil and wind. Elias stepped toward them, still holding my wrist, and the forest pulsed with hunger. I begged him to stop, but he only looked at me with those impossible eyes and said the words that still hollow out my bones. I was born cursed, but you were chosen. The shadows surged, and I felt the world tilt as my vision fractured into shards of moonlight. The last thing I remember before everything went silent was Elias letting go of my wrist, and the sickening realization that he hadn't needed to pull me into the darkness. I was already stepping toward it on my own. When I woke, dawn fog choked the village, thick and metallic on my tongue. I staggered toward the houses, unsure whether the night had ended or simply changed shape. Doors hung open, tools lay abandoned, and every surface felt touched by something that didn't belong. People gathered around me, desperate for answers I couldn't give. I told them Elias was taken by the forest, that he wasn't meant to stay among us, but my words twisted in their fear. They saw the bruise on my wrist where his hand had held me, darkening into the same broken spiral he carried since birth. Whispers spread like flame. The curse had moved. The omen had chosen again. They bound my arms and dragged me to the square, insisting sacrifice was the only way to break the lineage of darkness. But as they prepared their cleansing fire, the air shifted. A low hum rose from the tree line, vibrating through the ground, through my ribs. Elias stepped out of the forest, barefoot, unchanged, eyes reflecting a depth that rejected sunlight. The ropes slid from my wrists as if recognizing a new master. Villagers fell to their knees, some praying, some begging, none daring to meet his gaze. He reached out his hand, small and steady, and I felt the same pull that had swallowed the others. I understood then that the curse had never been his alone. It had been searching for someone willing to listen. I walked toward him because the choice was already made long before either of us was born. As I took his hand, the forest opened like a slow, deliberate breath, and its shadows folded around us. The village dimmed behind us, shrinking into silence as if the world had decided it was no longer part of our story. Elias looked up and spoke in a voice that was barely a whisper, yet heavier than thunder. You weren't taken. You were called. And as we entered the dark, I understood the forest had not taken me. It had claimed what was its own,